So we can start with just simple introductions. There's a chance for reflection on the master plan in item 3. So I will start, and if people just give their, start with committee members, and if you could just give your designation as well on the committee. And I'll start. I'm George Tolumpsis. I'm the planning board representative to the committee, and I am the vice chair, and I facilitate per delegation of the chair, who I'll call on next. Hannah.
Yes, thank you. I'm Hannah Rekschathen. I'm the chair and also a member at large. I'm pretty sure.
And I'll call on Phil.
I'm the city council representative and as of last month, the elected secretary taking notes.
Very good, thank you. And I'll call on Carol.
I am Carol Collins, the Director of Energy and Sustainability for the city. And I'm very appreciative of Phil taking the notes.
Thank you. Next, I'll call on Jonah, who I'm assuming is an official member at this point.
I have been sworn in. It's official.
Yes.
So yes, glad to be here in that capacity. And I am a member at large, I believe.
Very good. Thank you very much. Nancy.
Nancy Hazard, member at large.
Thank you. Marlo.
Yes, I'm Marla Warner, your Department of Public Works Director, liaison to the SGIC.
Very good. And if anyone help me, I'm trying to get this on gallery view so I can see everybody at one time. And I'm not having luck this time. I usually can do that. If anyone has a tip, I'll take it. So Tracy.
Yes, I am here. Newbie. Tracy Allen.
And you're an at-large member, correct? Great.
Yes.
And did I get all the members of the committee? I think so, going down the list here. So I know we have Lindsay's.
Nancy.
No.
Oh, I thought I did. No?
Oh, okay.
Okay, thanks, though. Keep me honest. And Lindsay, did you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Lindsay Rose, City of Greenfield Community Development Administrator and biggest groupie.
Thank you. And I know we have a guest speaker. Jeff, perhaps you could introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Jeff Sauser, local resident. I'm not on video because I'm juggling some children at the moment, but they're behaving so far. And I guess I'm here to talk about parking, traffic, bike lanes, that sort of thing. I'm a urban planner by day also, and I also am co-owner of Green Space Co-work downtown.
Thank you so much, and we'll look forward to getting to that agenda item in a little bit. And I see, I don't want to neglect other people who are here. Obviously, members of the public can attend and don't have to participate in any way, but I see Deb Wilson is here. Didn't know if you want to take the opportunity or you just pass, that's fine as well.
Hi, I'm Deb Wilson, and I'm just interested. That's all.
That's great. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think I got everybody. Please holler if I didn't. So next, trying to catch up here is, I guess we have two sets of minutes to approve. First is January. Is there a motion to approve from a member of the committee?
So moved, Phil.
Second, Marla.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on that set of minutes for January? Hearing none. All committee members in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well, let me ask this too to help Phil. Are there any committee members against or abstaining? It can be sometimes easier. Okay, thank you so much. They pass unanimously. And as far as the February minutes, is there a motion?
So moved. Approve.
Second.
Second.
And any discussion on the February minutes?
I thought they were particularly well done.
If you do
A very nice impartial comment from Phil, the drafter of the minutes. Thank you. And any other comments or praise for those minutes? Hearing none. Is there anyone who on the committee who is going to object, or abstain? Because if not, it might be easier this way to hearing none. So that's passed unanimously. Thank you. MJ, I think you just joined us, unless I missed you. If you just want to do a brief introduction of yourself and your role on the committee or position on the committee. Thanks.
Sure. I'm MJ Adams, Director of Community and Economic Development for the City of Greenfield. I am the designee for the Planning Director on this committee.
Thank you
Sorry
so
to be
much.
late.
No,
I got tied up with a phone call on the way home from a colleague.
okay. All right, no scolding in the meeting. Thank you.
I fessed up.
Okay, thank you. Item number 3 is updates rather, and announcements related to the master plan. We have 10 minutes allotted. We're running a little behind, so I wouldn't assume every member of the committee needs to offer something, but certainly want to accept any thoughts that committee members have. And I also, because I can't figure out this gallery view, if I don't see your hand raised, please speak up. Is there anyone who wants to?
Nancy has her hand up.
Nancy, please. Thank you.
I want to, I'm so excited about seeing the library go up, and in particular, that the solar panels are much more visible from the street than I ever imagined they would be. And I particularly want to thank Carol for being on that committee and everybody else who worked so hard to make that building that way. And I also want to thank Carol and express excitement about that Carol had been invited to speak about the CPACE event, or the fact that we're the first, Greenfield has the first CPACE community. I don't know, everybody doesn't know what that means, I'm sorry. I can't ever say it right. Maybe Carol can help me with that. But anyway, Massachusetts Climate Action Network had a webinar about the money available for commercial buildings. And Carol was asked to speak about the Abercrombie building because it's the first in the state.
Great.
And it was a great presentation, so I think and it was recorded, so I'm hoping that it will be useful to educate people about what CPACE is all about. And I won't go into that.
Very good. Thank you, Nancy. Any other committee members have an update they want to offer or announcement related to the master plan that's not already on the agenda? I do have gallery view now, so if you have your view, I can see you. Thank you. Okay, so I guess we're ready to move on to item number 4, which is focus on the parking and bike lane issues. And Jeff, I don't know if Hannah, you want to do any other further orientation or introduction, but otherwise, Jeff, you can take it away, I think. If you're, and it'd be good to see if you're not still juggling children. I'd be interested in seeing that.
George, could I set this up a little bit?
Please, yes.
Yeah. I thought it would be good to have Jeff, who's championed the idea of bringing bike lanes, and MJ through the main street, and Marla, who told us last time that it was impossible, and because the street was too narrow. And I wanted to raise the question of, is there a compromise? Would it be possible to have parallel parking on one side and angled parking on another, depending on what businesses are behind there and who's affected? And I believe Marlo has measured all this stuff, so I would love to know what's possible and what isn't. And also, Jeff was kind enough to send me some research that on the question of, if you build it, will they come? Do retail sales go up when bike lanes are in place? And there's several studies, peer-reviewed, that shows that that happens. There's a lot of things that have to happen, but that bike lanes have proved economically beneficial. Anyway, so that's why I invited Jeff here.
Very nice.
Or
Thanks.
actually, Nancy invited him, or MJ, someone did.
And
Thanks.
thank you very much, Phil, for that. And before we move on to Jeff, since you referenced Marlo, I just want to offer my opinion. He likely did do some measurements. And Marlo, I didn't know if you want to, you looked like you reacted to the question about the impossibility of the width for the bike lanes. Didn't know if you want to comment on that or just do it during the course of the conversation.
Well, we can do a little bit of both. And I think I just want to say that Main Street looks awfully wide in areas. But when you put bike lanes in with angled parking, which by the way, angled parking with bike lanes in the travel lane is probably the most dangerous bike lanes you can possibly install. We all know what it's like to back out from an angled parking spot. It's very, there's a lot of dead spots. You cannot see till you basically get 3/4 of your car out in the lane or vehicle. So, you know, the concept of Councilor Elmer of one side and not the other is something I haven't really looked at. And very briefly, when we submitted the very draft plans to Mass DOT for Main Street project, it does show bike lanes on both sides and going to parallel parking. So this could be a very long discussion how the TPO tip works and funding and all that good stuff. And I'll be happy to answer any questions, but really we're not set in stone on that Main Street project with the TPO until we get through the next round of funding and engineering, which I hope that the city council funds coming up for my capital. So then we'll know a lot more public input and decision making probably come fall if that funding comes through next month in the capital process. So that's kind of a brief overview, and I want Jeff to jump in and I can assist wherever anybody has any questions.
Excellent. Thank you for that context. Jeff, take it away.
Great, thank you. And look at me for a second. Here's Soren, so he's the one who's distracting me right now.
Hi.
Busy for now, but so I'll just turn that off so that I can respond to whatever chaos ensues over here. So thanks again for inviting me here. I recently was talking with, or I kind of moderated a conversation about parking with the GBA, Greenfield Business Association, and folks from this group might have been on that too. In that case, I was a impartial moderator, facilitator. Just the goal there was to hear from businesses, in particular, anticipating the downtown plan that MJ is leading, and also the Main Street project that Marlo's leading that he just discussed. Just what did the businesses wanted a chance to compare notes on what parking means to them, and what's sacred, what's not, from their perspective, ahead of a process where all those things will continue to get discussed. I'm also on the Parking and Traffic Commission for what it's worth, but I won't be speaking on behalf of them. And I guess as a planner, I work for public sector clients and private sector clients all over the country. And parking is always what everything boils down to, inevitably. It's the most important issue for approvals. Oftentimes there's a disconnect between what parking quantities are required and how much somebody actually needs, and often it's the requirements are too high, and there wasn't enough room, or the parking costs too much to build because you have to do structured parking. Now on the streets too, parking is a major component of streetscape projects, and an ingredient in a complete street, which I know is one of this committee's priorities for Main Street and elsewhere, but can be challenging to fit on-street parking with bike lanes, with wide sidewalks, with landscape and trees and benches and all the other things you need. So I don't have a presentation or anything. I was curious. I'm able to talk about all those things. We could focus on the Main Street piece. We could focus on downtown as a whole too. Parking really wants to work as a system. I think some business owners kind of believe that the 3 parking spaces in front of their storefront belong to them, and that's really all they see, and it does kind of operate that way informally somewhat. But if you're planning for parking and thinking about the future of your parking supply, I think you need to think more holistically about the whole inventory downtown, and there's lots of flux in that and in Greenfield these days, about as much as you could ever see. Almost every parking lot is either going away, getting bigger, or changing into a skate park or becoming a garage. So it's a great time to talk about that. And then also just most generally, places like Greenfield, and I moved here from Boston in part because of this, are where the action is from. Just this, where people want to move to next, you know, the quality of life, living in a walkable community, being able to work remotely. There's just a lot more choice today than there ever was before. And places like Greenfield with quality downtowns and wonderful settings and great communities are competing with each other to attract new folks to move there. I mean, these are all aging communities. So we've got to do what we need to support the older folks in town, but also attract newer folks and get the next generation in place. So I really think that a high quality downtown, a walkable downtown, a navigable, bikeable downtown, these are all really critical to Greenfield succeeding in the next 10, 20, 30 years from an economic development standpoint too. So do you guys have any starting point, or is there a certain issue that's been coming up that, you know, that we could focus on, or is it better to talk broadly? I did look at the sustainable master plan, which I look at frequently, you know, now and then, and parking specifically wasn't, you know, I don't remember seeing a very specific action item on that. It's a common thread underpinning a number of components of the plan. But is there anything in particular, or should we just talk broadly about it for starters?
I'll call on myself first. A couple of things. One, actually having chaired the transportation subcommittee in the development of the master plan, I know that it was actually referenced, and specifically the idea of looking into going to parallel parking on Main Street to accommodate bike lanes was one thing that's referenced in there. Quite sure. The other thing is I want to, the terms of the discussion, I just wanted to mention, when you reference parking, I would suggest we also keep in mind bicycle parking, not just car parking. So just wanted to throw that out there. Who else has a comment or question to keep the discussion flowing? Nancy, yes.
I would like a sort of a big picture discussion before jumping into the details. I mean, so Jeff, you're putting on the table, you know, we need downtown walkable, bikeable, and we have you can live here and work remotely. We already got that. So you know, I mean, you've lived here now for a while, and I just love your thoughts about what you think might be a good direction to go.
Sure. Well, I think often I get pulled into work on a professional level when there's something big that's changing, and when there's a big investment that's about to happen, and the community wants to make sure they get it right. So I think just this committee and this plan are a great way to maintain, you know, incremental momentum and make sure and just keep an eye on the next things that are being built to make sure they're always in keeping with the values that the plan stands for. But if we're rebuilding Main Street, for example, we need to make sure we get that right and we maximize its value relative to the sustainable goals of the community and economic development goals of the community. So often you kind of have these shared values that everyone articulates and updates, and then you apply those to the opportunities of the day. And over the course of several years, you kind of have had a chance to touch everything that there is to touch, and then, you know, the world changes and you kind of have to do it again. So Main Street is just such a great way to boil down distill a lot of these issues into a very specific design exercise. And Main Street is also the first touch point people have with the community. And I think people can get carried away imagining what some visitor experiences when they first come to a place and they've never been there before, and you know, all these signs that tell them where to go. But in reality, most people using downtown live here. They sort of know where they're going. So it needs to really function on a day-to-day basis, and also have a way of operating differently when, you know, it needs to do different things. Like Court Square, for example, it needs to be very different on a Saturday morning in the summer than it does on a, you know, Wednesday afternoon in the winter. And so the more you can kind of build an urban environment that's responsive and flexible to those demands, the better.
I'll offer, thank you, Jeff. I'll offer a broad, kind of broad perspective too, in the sense of, because I bicycle so much and have for so many decades, I'm just can offer that vantage point. And I know in some of the reading we did in preparing the master plan, I was struck with the concept that looking at the transportation ecosystem, and for the bike lane ecosystem, you want as many areas to be as safe and attractive for a wide range of cyclists, ages, competencies, et cetera. And kind of the reverse of Marla was talking about, no pun intended, but the reverse he was talking about backing out of this angled parking and how hard it is to see a cyclist, especially those who are going the wrong way on the wrong side. I'll just add that. For a cyclist, I mean, I'm comfortable biking on Main Street. I've done it many, many hundreds of times, but I am, really competent, really have developed a lot of skills. I'm really assertive about telling people you're backing up into me. And I don't think you're going to have a much of a spectrum of cyclists who would be comfortable with that. So you want to make the environment, the built environment, as safe and as conducive, because that will increase the percentage of people who bike there, and that will increase just the balance of transportation usage. So I want to offer that.
That's exactly right. There's a continuum or spectrum of bike facilities that you can gauge in terms of what level of cycling skill do you need to feel like you can actually use that thing. I'm similar, and then I'll bike in any situation down the interstate, whatever, in all the big cities, and good for me. But that doesn't help most people who maybe don't want to take their life in their hands. One second.
And as you're attending there, people with children. And the downtown, people who may not know, very typical of most communities, it's illegal to bike on the sidewalk in the central commercial district for reasons of pedestrian safety. So that's a bit of a conundrum for people with younger kids as well.
That's right. And also even older people maybe just are just starting to cycle. I mean, it needs to be an inviting thing to begin to learn how to do. You shouldn't have to be so brave to be able to do it. Otherwise it's off limits. It's just not fair. So I guess, what that comes down to is a question of trade-offs. If we're thinking about the safety of backing out of a parking spot or the number of parking spots, and especially when there's situations where you can't really have the ideal version of all things at the same time. I know that there's business owners that don't want to lose a parking spot because they see those as a lifeline for their business, and that's completely understandable. But if you have all angled parking, you can't have bike lanes everywhere because Main Street's just not wide enough to fit everything you'd ever want all at the same time at every block. And maybe in some areas where it's wider, you might be able to have more angled parking. There's less demand for parking over there. Unfortunately, the place where most people want to park is in the segment of Main Street that's the narrowest. But you can't have a broken bike network either. So you kind of have to choose, what are we going to solve for first? And I would argue that having a first-class bike network is the top priority. You don't want to compromise on that because otherwise you might as well not even have a bike lane. If it's between travel lanes and angled parking, no one's going to use it. That's basically the same as what we have now. So in my mind, the best parking orientation is to put the bike lane at sidewalk level or maybe at street level, but between the parking spaces and the sidewalk, so that there's no conflict between the two, and you'd want to have a buffer so that the doors don't hit the cyclists. And I know that this is what I'm describing is consistent with a lot of the plans that are out there right now, the two options that are being explored in engineering. So that's great. And then you kind of fit the parking where you can. Another consideration is, we're often kind of trying to buy a foot here, a foot there. And one thing that we often do is narrow the travel lanes beyond what the state might be comfortable with. If it's a state route, you have to fight somebody. I will say it's easier to accomplish in Massachusetts than in Georgia or Texas. But often when you're in the heart of a downtown environment, a 10-foot travel lane is plenty. 2 10-foot travel lanes is plenty. and that can give you a little more space. It slows the cars down. You can also introduce more places where traffic stops. So one thing did a project in Indiana where we added a bunch of stop signs at a series of intersections in the heart of downtown Hammond. And if you're trying to speed from Chicago to Gary, you're not going to go through the middle of this town anyway. So you don't need to go 70 miles an hour. But the stop signs, oh, sorry, 1 second.
And during the pause, Jeff, I'll offer that you may have noticed that in the master plan, it encourages a standard of 11 feet for lanes and 10 feet where feasible. So that is incorporated because, as you may not know, a lot of places have gone with 12 feet as kind of a standard. So
yeah, that's right. And your parking spaces can be really narrow too. You don't have to make them 8 or 9 feet wide. They can be 7 feet wide. I mean, I know not these all don't. You can't actually fit a big car in that space, but it can overlap. I mean, there's a lot of fuzzy area you can kind of cheat with, as long as it's not impossible to use. All these little squeezes just end up slowing down traffic, which is a good thing, as long as you don't make it unsafe. So I think the first goal is to decide what's the sacred thing that you really do want to make sure is really good. And the bike lane is the least fungible. And then you work out from there, get the parking, maybe you do the bike lane, then you get the travel lane as tight as possible, and see what kind of parking you can fit. In some cases it's angled, sometimes it's parallel. I will say that it's okay to have a mix. I mean, we have a mix already in Greenfield. It doesn't have to be all parallel or all angled. I would say get whatever you can get. While angled parking is more dangerous or front end angled parking is more dangerous than parallel or back end, in a community where everyone's used to it, it's okay. It's still, and we all have backup cameras now, and soon cars will be parking and unparking themselves with the touch of a button anyway. So, I would say that's an okay compromise to let the business owners have the increased parking supply. You can always repaint it later. Anything you do in paint and not with curbs and pipes and hard things, you can change. As MJ knows, as we talk about with Court Square and experimenting, that's the best way to go. So we can't change the curbs, but we can change the lines. I also noticed in the drawings that there was a median that was painted on. I mean, I know that's all just a preliminary engineering drawing, but if you have very narrow travel lanes and you have on-street parking and you have bike lanes, the median is probably the most expendable ingredient in that street. It just kind of wastes space that you would rather use for those other things, unless you just have extra room. And if you do have extra room, a median is helpful, especially at crossings, just because it gives pedestrians a little more of a refuge and signals to cars they need to slow down. It kind of squeezes them a little bit. So it might be that at intersections, you think about bump outs, which is when the curb kind of jumps out past the parking to squeeze the street. And these are all psychological games that you play with the drivers to just constrain the space they have so that the pedestrians and cyclists can have more to work with. I think that we have a stoplight at Federal Street, and then there's really no other place where you would ever need to stop coming down Main Street. And I'm sure we've all seen folks driving pretty quick through the middle of town. So I think it would make sense to consider another signal or a stop sign or two at some of those intersections, just to slow people down, force them to stop. It doesn't impact traffic throughput at all, or hardly at all. It might slow them down, but my dream would actually be to have stop signs at Main and Federal. I don't think anyone else would maybe go for that. It would need to be studied. But that intersection is a great other candidate where all the ingredients come together. There's a ton that could be improved, and it's also really important to the community from multiple angles, from a traffic flow angle, from a biking angle, from a pedestrian angle. I think it'll be fun to tackle that one in the course of these projects going forward.
Thanks. Phil, I saw your hand, and then Nancy, you next.
I thought I'd ask Marla, what is code for width of travel lane?
So you can go as minimum as 9 feet. I'm not real comfortable with 9 feet, and especially on this project, for the simple fact you have trailer trucks cruising Main Street for deliveries. We also have numerous responses from the fire department that where folks need to yield over to the edge and we got to get them through. If I remember the math right, if we went to, and I'm not advocating, I got to look at everything from 1,000 feet, kind of like what Jeff was saying. All these brilliant, great ideas, and I think they're awesome. You know, we got to look at the standard and the code on the other end too, and how does it fit in this very old infrastructure? How do we get this done? So if you went to angled parking and put the bike lanes against the curbing, as Jeff had mentioned, which is the safest, with a 1-foot stripe to separate the two, you're going to end up with pretty close to the same travel lanes you have right now with the angled parking. So, you know, within reason. So you add that 5-foot bike lane with a 1-foot stripe and you go to parallel parking. Again, you're setting out from the curb about this pretty close to the same distance you are right now, but we've incorporated the safe bike lanes and kept them out of the travel lanes. So there's two concepts with this as this project goes forward. We can put the bike lanes outside of the parallel parking, which isn't horrible. It's still better than backing out into a bike lane. So I hope that answers your question. There's different ways we can do this with what we have to work with.
And some of it has to do with if it's a state route or not, and if the DOT, the state DOT is enlightened or not. But I think in Massachusetts, it's often possible to do what's best for the community.
Yes, you're correct, because I had to reach out to Mass DOT concerning some warning lights or flashing lights with the new fire station going in. It is Route 2A. Although we're responsible for all upkeep and all infrastructure, it's still Route 2A. They were very good about that. They said we can do anything we want as long as we hit the code, Mass DOT standards. So that's kind of what I'm running with here when I say minimum 9-foot lines, 5-foot bike lanes with a 1-foot stripe with separation. That's the standard from Mass DOT perspective. You'll see the bike lanes down near Dunkin' Donuts where they weave into traffic, but you'll see it's a 1-foot wide striped line with a biker symbol separating it from the motor vehicle traffic.
And I'll just mention, when I went to a transportation conference a few months ago and had a lot of MassDOT folks there, they're much more progressive, is the sense I was getting, than it was, you know, not too many years ago. Overall, that was my sense.
And I might want to add that this program, this grant we're trying to get, is funded by Mass DOT and Federal Highway Administration through the TPO, the TIP program, as we call it, Transportation Improvement Plan. So there's nothing that goes untouched that doesn't hit standard from Mass DOT on this project as we move forward. So that's kind of a small determining factor of what we can do or not do going forward for the funding on this project when we get to that.
Nancy, you're muted there.
Jeff, you were talking about bump outs. I assume all the bumps have to go away, right, in order to get a bike lane you're talking about.
You can keep bump outs. You just kind of chop it off along the curb line.
Right.
And that's off. That can be a good thing for drainage too. Sometimes bump outs are problematic because they just create giant pools of water. So that might work in with how drainage operates.
Marla, you had a comment too.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways of doing that. Good point, Jeff. You can actually, we will have to shorten the bump outs, obviously, if we went to parallel parking. It would be shortened. And again, we're in initial design. I'm waiting for the next piece of the design money as we move forward. But you can actually run the bike lanes, design what's left of the bump outs, right through the bike lanes, right through the bump outs to keep them in line with the curbing. There's different designs depending on how, distances work out, so on and so forth.
That's right. Yeah. A few other random things, and you cut me off when you guys need to move to the next thing, and I'll feel free to invite me back anytime.
Keep going, Jeff. Keep going.
Just going to rattle off a few other ideas that I think are important. When you are thinking about and I know there's limitations to where curbs can change, and we have to kind of deal with, and Marla will be guiding us through those questions as we get into the nitty gritty, but in the future, the design process. But there's another psychological thing where whenever you have a driveway that leads into a parking lot, ideally the car has to ramp up onto the sidewalk so that they are signaling that they're entering the pedestrian realm, as opposed to the curb cut dropping down to the driveway where the pedestrian has to step down into the driveway. Then the pedestrian's in the car zone and they're in danger. So that, I think, where it's possible to do things like that, I would want to do that, and just generally minimize curb cuts where you can, so there's fewer conflicts, interactions between cars and pedestrians. I know that there was an access management idea in the sustainable master plan, which is a term for just connecting, making it easier to, on one hand, connect between adjacent parking lots in ways you don't have to drive onto the street and then back into the parking lot, but also there's some parcels in Greenfield that have like 19 different ways to get into a parking lot that nobody ever uses. So decommissioning some curb cuts might be something worth considering too, as we're redoing this.
And just
sure.
Just to be clear, Jeff, you're talking about curbs cuts, not for pedestrians. You're talking about curb cuts for cars.
Yeah, in a situation where a car turns 90 degrees to cross the sidewalk or the pedestrian path to get into a parking lot, or even to get onto a secondary road or alleyway. Those cars don't need to be going at highway speeds. The geometries should always be, right angles and things that make cars uncomfortable and want to go slow, and not things that are designed for streamlined, you don't even have to slow down. I saw that there was one idea where there was a roundabout at High Street and another where there was not a roundabout. I know that I've seen some discussion that the roundabout actually wouldn't fit without taking property. I think roundabouts in urban locations are not good because you want cars to stop, and the whole point of a roundabout is that cars don't have to stop. So it creates challenges for pedestrians and cyclists. There's no easy way to deal with that with a roundabout. You might as well just have a 3 or 4 way intersection and then save the roundabouts for the rural place, like over by GCC. That one makes sense.
Point taken. Thank you. Yes, Marla.
Yeah, there was 2 conceptual designs submitted to Mass DOT in Boston. One of them did have the roundabout, or small rotary, as some people call it. And then there was also improvements to the High and Main Street intersection to make more 90-degree angles, to your point, Jeff. And that's certainly the direction I'm going in. And to kind of hit on the land taking, we're going to be messing around with a very historical property on that corner of Main and High, which could, put the project out forever. That's, it didn't fit well. We would have had to take a lot of historical property or easements on it, and that could be a very long, lengthy process. And to go through that and the expense of it and what we're gaining just didn't, in my opinion, prove true working with Fuss and O'Neill on this.
And you'd lose your place in line for funding too if it's not ready to go.
Yeah, well, the TIP process is interesting. We just found out this week we're programmed for FY27. So to be clear on that, it's whoever gets to the finish line first on their engineering. The communities have to put up the engineering money, reach a 75% to 100% design. And if other communities are not ready in the program, in the hopper, an example is Wisdom Way just got moved up 3 years because we were aggressive on the engineering and did our part for this program. So the more aggressive we are on the engineering, the sooner we get the 75 to 100%. We're the lead horse in that project, depending on other communities hitting the finish line on the engineering and design. That's our contribution to this. What now is programmed as a $5.8 million project.
And to appreciate your point, Jeff, about the High Main Street roundabout idea, it was really an auto-centric notion, because the idea of cars having a place to turn around, because we've all seen, I think, people do U-turns on Main Street and that kind of thing, because it's not really easy. But your point is well taken that if we're looking at all users, it would being a complete street, particularly for pedestrians, I think it would be challenging.
Yeah,
thanks.
I think, and Marla might not want to hear this, or some people in the police department might want to hear, but making a really awkward U-turn in the middle of the street is, I mean, maybe you just have to do that sometimes. I always feel like a city is a safe place for pedestrians if you can jaywalk at any time and feel like you're not going to get killed. And crosswalks are just suggestions, they're not where you have to cross. So a little bit of chaos is a good thing within reason. I mean, that's one reason why rotaries, and I say roundabouts because I'm not from Massachusetts, are actually, we on the parking commission, we were, Marla, we've talked to you about this in that context. I live near the High Street intersection, so I see it all the time. And I was surprised to hear that that's actually not a very dangerous intersection if you measure danger by the number of accidents that happen there. And part of the reason for that is because it's confusing. And the more confusing a situation is for a driver, the slower they're going to go, the more careful they're going to be. They're not going to tune out. They're going to pay attention and perk up. So a little bit of that can be good, but obviously you want to design for safety and not count on chaos governing.
And that was the other reason why we kind of put the rotary situation second in line. I think some improvements there, creating the approaches to be more of a 90-degree angle would be the way to go. Exactly for that reason, it kind of bucks the reasoning that you would think there would have been many more accidents there by the looks of that intersection. It's an uncomfortable intersection for many, and it amazed me that the data on accidents or other things happen there is so low, if not any.
Great. I'm going to call on Phil, but before that, I just looking at the clock, we probably have a little over 5 minutes for this item. So wanted to, after Phil, see if anyone else has a comment or a question they want to make. Go for it, Phil.
I had a question for Marlo. 5.8 million, is that the town's contribution or the total cost?
No, I'll give you even numbers because as we know, construction is escalating 4% a year, if not more right now. So it was originally 5.4 when this all started. They just recently programmed it for 5.8 total. That's the actual project. The city's contribution and overall for engineering and design is going to be around 600,000. And
Right.
Those ain't exact numbers, but we're in that vicinity.
Thank you. And
Yep.
I wanted to thank Jeff for coming. I really appreciate it. I felt like there was a plan underfoot that was going to change life for Greenfield in a significant way, and that it wasn't being talked about. And I thought it was good to have the MBA conversation to hear from the business owners. And I really appreciate Jeff and Marla addressing it here. I wanted to ask Jeff whether he was surprised by the vehemence of the opposition at the meeting that he facilitated.
Opposition, what do you mean? Which
from the
if there was
business
sense.
owners who felt like money was being taken out of their pocket.
I'm not surprised at all, and I completely understand. I own a business on Main Street that luckily didn't rely on parking, but I work with folks like that all the time, and they've been punched in the gut about 10 times in the past 4 years. So I can understand why they wouldn't want to just get a gratuitous, punch in the nose from the town as they might perceive it when they're just trying to get their act back together. They're just climbing out of the COVID meltdown and they didn't lose their business miraculously. So if it feels to them like a zero-sum game, or it's just one more loss for them, that's going to lead to a heated discussion. But it doesn't have to be that way, really, as long as there's, I think, an open dialogue the whole time. People are clear about what their priorities are and why they're making decisions they're making, so that everyone can see that it actually maybe is in their interest in just a different way. That's a bigger picture. And I think a walkable, vibrant downtown is worth a couple parking spaces, and these businesses will see more business for it. It just might be that someone has to walk a tiny bit further. But so I think we need to, in all this planning, need to be responsive to those concerns. But the other, just a quick point, I'll just reference and maybe not unpack. is there's more to parking than just the number of parking spaces. I don't think that you need to have a bunch of 2-hour parking spaces in front of an office supply store or a clothing store or a bakery. Anyone who's parking in those spaces is not using those businesses. They're parking there for some other reason, probably. So if those 10 spots or 15 spots, how many there are on that block of Main Street, were 30-minute spots, you would effectively quadruple the parking capacity of that street, because you'd have more turnover of business of cars. And then if you can communicate that successfully to the community, they'll be able to accept a net reduction in the total parking spaces, understanding that the collective capacity of the downtown parking inventory has actually gone up. So it's a nuanced conversation, but there's ways to really satisfy everybody, I think, to some degree.
Thanks, Jeff. MJ and then Tracy.
Yeah, I wanted to share with you that, I absolutely agree that, the business community has really, endured these last 2 years and have been very valiant in that. I think that what the city needs to do, and we're already working on that, is really trying to, number one, have someone in charge of parking, because we it's sort of all over the map. And one of the things that we did as a result of the local rapid recovery piece last summer was really recognize that we probably need to do more thoughtful planning around parking management. And so we're actually going to be seeking some funding support to do a parking management plan to really take a look at what our needs are. And we know that we're just coming out of COVID, so counting things right now might not be the best, but that we want to be on top of it. The other thing I'll share with you is that, it was clear that there's some blocks that get bogged down or that are heavily used with the parking. And one of the things that I end up finding myself doing time to time is responding to business concerns that, even though it's a 2-hour parking meter, that somebody's been parked there all day and they just feed the meter. So we just brought in another enforcement staff person into parking enforcement, and we've asked them to let's start. We're going to do some compliance assistance, like educating people that when it says 2 hours of parking, that means 2 hours and not much more. And so we're going to be getting the word out there to say that a 2-hour meter is a 2-hour maximum meter, and we're going to ramp up. But first, we're going to do like some communication and education around the I would call the repeat offenders. And we know the cars that are the ones, and instead of giving them a ticket, we'll give them a reminder initially. So we're actually working on that because I do think that there is some concern that there are cars that park and feed meters. And now that we have an additional parking enforcement officer, we can actually start to do something about that. And the other piece is just, really taking a look at, I think that somebody's mentioned in that forum that different blocks have different parking personalities. And I think that that's something that we should really tune into. And it was really a good observation that, when there's a lot of parking spaces that are open, it doesn't reflect well on us. We want to see our Main Street parking used well and used adequately. So we just need to do a better, the city, and we recognize this. So we're trying to figure out how we can do a better job of managing the parking that we have, especially in light that we're going to be take some of that offline. I mean, we're looking at the skateboard park. When that comes in, it's going to reduce the number of parking spaces, and also just trying to figure out how to get those folks who are frequent high intensity users of Main Street, if they can park a block back and that make sense for folks. I mean, it's really interesting the number of people that I see, like I said, feeding the meters on Main Street in my regular walks up and down. And so we are paying attention to that. And we want to be really clear with folks that we're doing this because we feel it's important for the business community to have a good sense, and who highly value those parking spaces, to use them for the highest and best uses along Main Street. So.
Thank you, MJ. And Tracy, it looks like you'll have the last question or comment on this chapter of this discussion.
Okay, thanks. I'm just trying to get my head wrapped around all of this. It's a lot to take in. There's a lot I don't know still. I'm just curious, the economy lot on Chapman and the parking lot, the new garage over by the transportation center. How much use do those get, like during the work week? Are there cars parked there? Do those places fill up? Are they empty? Does anybody know?
I can say for the garage that we've sold out of monthly passes,
Wow.
which is a wonderful accomplishment. And the reason for that is, for one thing, it's a very convenient place to park, and it's doesn't get, it's covered from the weather. The price was lowered to a reasonable level. Parking should not be considered a revenue center exclusively. It's another one of the trade-offs that we need to consider. If you're trying to maximize parking, you're trying to use parking to maximize revenue, you're going to work against your downtown in a bunch of other ways. Really, parking pricing should be optimized you should be maximizing utilization. Every space except one should always be full. And then your pricing is right. If they're all empty, it's probably because they're too expensive. That's one reason. I mean, there's all sorts of other things that factor too. But I think that's why the garage is getting a lot more use. As for the downtown lot, I'm not quite sure. I think people have not fully come back to downtown, but I do think it's, that we're getting, the numbers are coming back up. And I think MJ's idea about a parking management plan, and one of the first things you do is to take a deeper dive into the utilization of the parking we have. And it's a dynamic thing. Understanding the different peak periods and when, the personalities change from block to block and from day to night and weekday to weekend. So I think it's a wonderful thing to do. And I think that MJ and Marla are doing a great job at this really important moment in downtown's life. Just trying to wrestle with these things. It's as complicated as it gets, but tons of opportunity.
Great. Jeff, thank you so much for your participation in this meeting, and you're certainly welcome to stay as a member of the public if you wish, but I know you're pretty busy there too. So, and be happy to have you back at some point as well as we continue this work and this discussion.
Thank you. I will sign off. I can't believe kids have been good, but I gotta eat. So, but thank you, everybody. And I love talking about this stuff, as you hopefully can tell. And I look forward to public meetings again soon when we can be in face-to-face and some of these exciting planning efforts that MJ and others are leading are kicking off. So, and
before you sign off, I think Marla had a comment. Is that right?
Yeah, I was actually going to give up a minute of my time on the agenda, which was next, just to since we were closing the previous section. But Jeff, MJ, I'm completely aware of the comment about punch in the gut. We all lived COVID. We know the impact on everybody's lives. We know the impact on the community, the businesses. So I don't want to say it's poor timing, but we got plenty of time to talk about all this and figure it out, as I discussed about the engineering. We can pump the brakes. It's not like it's set in stone. There's going to be public hearings in the next phase of the engineering if I'm appropriated the funds. So I just wanted to put that comment out there. It's not like anybody needs anxiety. We need, we're making a decision right now. We need to, we have options as we've discussed tonight. I just want to kind of put everybody at ease a little bit. It's not happening.
Yeah. And I would hope that as things are talked through and stuff, it could be seen as an opportunity to revitalize downtown, which I know is what we've all been working towards, rather than the fear of change that's such a natural, especially when people are under such stress. So yeah,
if it's
go ahead, Jeff. Sorry.
But just to Marlo's point, I know, and I hope you didn't take it this way, but I know that the town is not intending for it to feel that way. You're not trying to punch anybody in the gut. But that's just the perception that some can have when they've got laser focus on their experience. One thought, and I mean, we'd have to think about this a little more, is you certainly don't, I mean, you want to slow down for the sake of having a discussion, but discussions can go on forever. And it's most important that downtown get investment in every way possible, as soon as possible, from infrastructure and public space to housing and retail and whatever else. So it might be that if it were possible to decouple the engineering discussion from the operations discussion, for example, and just, like I said, with paint, we can just, the things that we want to have flexibility around, just make those be things that are painted on the road and don't really cost anything from an engineering perspective. Then they don't have to hold up the progress towards getting the engineering done. And we can talk about those for 3 more years in the meantime. it might not be possible for every variable on the table, but if it is possible to remove controversial things from the engineering punch list, then you don't get held up, Marla, because I think it's great to say that, but it also is dangerous, as you know, because it could, we do need to have a deadline at some point. But I appreciate that you're open to keeping the discussion going, for sure.
Yeah, you know, painting the mediums or raised curbing, you know, has its different issues in itself, you know, as an example. So we got to get public safety down the middle of Main Street, no matter where we end up. And if we have, you know, granite medians in the middle of the road, we're not going to have the road space. So I don't want to go on with it. This is great discussion, Jeff. We ought to chat sometime over coffee or whatever. I'd welcome that, and we could have a good old time.
Sure.
And Nancy, a last brief comment?
Yeah, I want to thank Jeff, and in particular, I find that having this big picture discussion about what's possible and stuff, it really important. And I think that if there's a way that, I don't know quite what the plans are to discuss it as we go forward, but having that, identifying the thing, as Jeff was saying, that we care about most, and then trying to figure out how to get it is rather than jumping into the plans that have been laid out where people are just going to have knee-jerk reactions again. Oh, I don't like this, I don't like that. I think it's really important and would facilitate the decision-making in Greenfield.
Very good. Thanks again, Jeff, and best wishes, and have a good evening.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening, too. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jeff.
And Marlo, as you previewed, you're up.
Did I use all my time already? I just have a couple of updates. Major project, Sanderson Street, you've heard me talk about it. We got a pre-construction meeting the first week of April. We expect to get that project going probably in May, a little later than anticipated, but it'll probably run itself through the full construction season in the next year, like 2 phases. The first phase is going to be from High Street to from Federal Street, and obviously we'll be working around the school area, Sanderson Street offices once school's out for the summer. We have a crew in town under our lining program, lining project, $625,000 lining project for inflow and infiltration. They've been in town for a week now, so hopefully they start lining pipes so we slow our I&I down to our treatment plant. We're sending out a bid for the dredging of the Leiden Glen, our water supply. That's been on a 2-year hold, all because of permitting, so on and so forth. The permitting changed, so it's a very lengthy process to drain the Leiden Glen and dredge the organics out of it and refill it. So those are kind of the big highlights. Getting ready for capital, as Councilor Elmer knows, and budget. So. And obviously we're starting to prep in spring. We pulled the trigger and we're starting to clean the parks up and everything. So Councilor Elmer, it's not going to snow again. So we got a head start. The other thing that I noted with the city council is we've run into the labor issue. That's a countrywide problem right now. I'm actually 7 laborers short right now.
Wow.
I have 3 offers out there. So what is a pretty thin department? If you look at our department from 1,000 feet and everything we do, we were a little thin to begin with, but we get it done, but we're really thin now. So there may be a few things that's going to take a lot longer to get to than normal. So we have to take care of health and safety first every day. So, but we're working on getting new employees in the door. I'm working on different things. So we're doing it.
Thank you, Marlo. Any comments or questions from anyone? Wow, it's striking to hear you're seven down, 7 staff. That is.
So it's an interesting dynamic. I mean, you know, the solid waste department, as you know, we collect our own trash and recycling with our own staff. So we're short in that department. So we have to pull from other departments to send staff up there every day to make sure we got our trash collected. That's a Board of Health issue. Obviously, we have to collect it. So water and sewer has its thing on a daily routine. And obviously the highway department's really busy with the roads right now. It was a really rough winter on the roads, as everybody probably knows. So we're sustaining, not where we want to be, but we'll get there. We always seem to find a way. So we're working on it.
I appreciate your hard work and this window into all the different things you're doing.
And we got a bunch of trees to plant too, as Nancy may know. So we got that on our radar. 200 trees. We're short in that department too, but we'll find a way.
And when you mentioned that, I remember that was in this meeting last time. I think the issue came up. Mary had brought up about the idea of the tree committee doing some of the labor of the planting. And I just think of the clay courts, the clay tennis courts, and there's a private group that I think partners with the DPW to maintain those as well. So I'm just appreciative of those kind of public-private partnerships to take care of some.
It's been really good over the years, short-staffed and budget-wise. We usually lay the new clay down. We grade it, laser grade it and pack it. And the tennis association comes in and puts the lines down and pushes the nails. That's the fun labor. That takes a long time to get the capes nailed down. But it's been a group effort for about 7 or 8 years now, and we certainly appreciate it, as there's plenty to do in the parks. Getting sports fields ready and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's a good partnership.
Yeah, something wonderful about a community of this size, this scale. Having those.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Marla. I guess we can move on, seeing no other comments or questions. Hannah, you were going to talk about these meetings, recordings of these meetings going to GCTV.
Yeah, just very briefly, I just wanted to let everyone know that we are going to be putting these recordings on GCTV, just so everyone was aware. It sounds like it's as easy as just sending them the recording. So we're going to start doing that. Yes.
Yes, Cal.
Sorry.
I was wondering, was there a call for that, or how did that come about?
I had initiated the question because I know I've been watching with having these Zoom meetings and having them recorded as compared to when there would happen to be filming of an in-person meeting. There's just been a ton of public meetings available on GCTV. And I found it very fascinating to check those out. And I realize we're always talking about trying to increase public awareness and of the master plan and efforts going toward the master plan. It seemed like, while we're having these Zoom meetings, which I don't know how much longer that'll last, it seemed like it would be, a nice opportunity to disseminate, what we're working on. So I had asked about it of Hannah and Phil, and that's why it's being brought up. Nancy.
Is this going to be advertised, or how are we going to get out the word that exists?
We certainly can. We could put it on our social media and just let folks know. Give a link to GCTV so that they know they can go there and check things out. I think especially when we have, guest speakers and different things, you never know who might want to hop on.
Phil.
Yeah, I was disappointed and nervous that we do have a page, a web page. Whoops. Have I lost you?
No.
We're just hearing a phone.
We have a web page, and it didn't say that it said that we had no meeting scheduled. And that's not a good invitation to the public. So no. if we could say when the meeting is scheduled, and if there's going to be a special guest, that would be the place to put it on our page on the city webpage, which has been redesigned and is actually easier to manage, navigate now.
And am I right that web page updates go through Christian in your office, MJ? Is that right? Is he the one who can sort of put things up for us?
He has access to the website. But I think that it's Carol's department that manages the webpage. She's
Yep.
she's the municipal liaison for the
Okay.
Sustainable Greenfield Committee, so.
But I still don't have a staff person, so I just
Okay.
can't get to it right now.
Totally.
It should say, as it always has, that we meet the fourth Thursday of the month. And it was always put on the calendar just, 48 hours in advance of the meeting with the agenda. So I don't think Lori had, I think it always said that there were no meetings scheduled, and that's how a lot of the pages are. So I think it's kind of a format. But anyone's welcome.
But I'm happy to have Christian do an upload if somebody wants to send some language to him. Probably best through either Hannah or George as the chair or vice chair.
Sure.
He's very good at putting stuff up. And so I just don't want to tread on my colleague's page without her permission.
Absolutely.
Have at it.
Permission
Yes, Phil.
granted.
Phil, you had your finger up?
No, that would be great, as long as there's a chain of command and we know whose job it is to do it. It probably shouldn't say no meeting scheduled in any event.
Right.
But the website doesn't say no meeting. It says next meeting,
Well,
March 24th.
It didn't all month. That's what that got changed.
Okay.
Thanks.
Well, I could definitely send an email to Christian with our upcoming meeting dates, and if we can just list them, if it's as simple as that, and then I can, as we have guest speakers, maybe he can just add them in there. We can email him and let him know along the way.
Yep, that'd be fine.
Great. Anything else on this topic? Seeing and hearing none. I wanted to check with you, agenda check with you, Hannah. I know there have been a couple things both Nancy and I had brought up that weren't on the typed agenda. We have general announcements coming up, but before that, I wondered if you wanted to touch on committee membership and the question of future agenda items and guests.
Yes. So I feel like I have missed a few meetings, so I don't know if we have already a backlog of guest speakers that we were interested in asking. I feel like we do, but I was trying to go back through my notes and find them. But is there anyone that has been recommended that we have not? Yeah.
Nancy, do you want to answer that?
There was a suggestion that we invite Susan Morgafty to talk about Greenfield, but we never agreed that that's what we were going to do. It was just a suggestion.
And just to offer it's a scheduling. She would only be available, at my understanding, from 5 to 5:30, because she has another meeting. The Community Preservation Committee meets at 5:30. But it was felt she would be such a good representative of the housing issue to have her come. So, So we hadn't specified for the next meeting, but we could now.
We want to ask her for April. Does anyone know if April would work? Yeah. Is anyone close with her and want to reach out? I do have her email, and we've emailed before, but I don't know her well. Anyone?
Oh. I talk to her about 3 times a week.
All right. Do you want to see if she could come in April and we can just have her kick it off and then do everything else after 5:30?
Yeah, as long as we can do it at the top. She has to be at the John Zahn for a 5:30 meeting.
Yep.
Okay. Great. And then
we'll also have the quarterly update from Lindsay for CDBG.
Yeah. And then maybe 2 things for next time. I think one is we can talk more about additional guest speakers, and also it might be time to check in about this virtual versus non-virtual meeting. So do we want to remain virtual for April in the interest of time at the moment, yes, I'm seeing, and then maybe next time we can check in. We do have leave from the state to continue to meet virtually until June if we want to.
Okay.
But I think it would be good maybe to give it a little time to hear everyone's comfort.
Okay.
Okay.
Any other thoughts about agenda items or touching on that? Yes, Carol.
I was just wondering if we could get an update on the projects that are going to be or plan to be implemented out of the local rapid recovery project. Because there were 12 projects proposed, I think, and I'd just love to hear where that wound up.
I'd love to present on that. I can, and we have some information about some funding resources, but it's embargoed, so I'm not allowed to say anything about it yet. But I'm happy to be on the agenda for April to give you an update on where we are with those.
When is the meeting next month?
It is the
21st.
28th.
The 28th?
21st?
Good.
I might have put it on there wrong.
28th?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, that's good. I have a grant due the week before, so I just wanted to make sure it didn't. Yep. It's
Good
gonna
luck.
be-
And I'll mention one thing about a future agenda item and guess perhaps. We were just referencing the Community Preservation Committee and Mark Maloney, who is the planning board rep to that committee, is also the chair. And he's been updating the planning board intermittently. And it might be, I know, Nancy, in another email, you referenced what's going on with that. And so I thought it might be good, since that was such a core recommendation of the master plan, to have him come to one of these meetings. If people, and I could start to feel him out for a future meeting if people give the okay for that.
That would be great.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Cal?
Just with both Susan and Mark, because their meeting starts a half hour after ours
Yeah,
does.
right.
Would it, I don't know if we want to entertain maybe starting earlier for those, if that's a possibility. I mean, it's just such a great thing to get these wonderfully knowledgeable people and then to be like, all right, hurry up. And
yeah,
you know, it'd be great to have a bigger chunk of time.
So you're asking that in relation to next month specifically for Susan, or?
Well, I'm just thinking logistically for her to be online here and then have to be at John's On, and I know they have trouble getting online there. So just
Really?
that's what I heard. So I don't know. Again, just trying to make it a little easier for the speakers so that because they're kind of doing us a favor and it's stuff that is really great to learn about. I'd love to have a bigger chunk of time if it can work for people. I just wanted to throw out options we can maximize.
So I hear you proposing that for next month.
If we could start at 4:30, if Susan wants.
Are there any, I know we had just gone to 5, and I know Hannah, you had particularly requested that. Does anyone want to comment? No, I'm asking if anyone wants to comment on that, just for one meeting at least, go to that, or?
I can say that I can most likely make 4:30 work for as long as we're still virtual. It would be very hard for me to get back to Greenfield for 4:30. Okay. But we are virtual next month, and so I can definitely.
Phil and then Carol?
I'm 4:30 is okay with me in general. I have to warn you that April 26th or 28th, one of those days is going to be a conflict for me, and I would have to miss it. I'm sorry. Let you know ahead of time. It's Apple's earnings report, and that's what I do for a living.
You're talking about the meeting generally, not the specific.
Yeah.
Okay.
The 4 times a year, I have a conflict.
Gotcha. Thanks. Carol, you had your hand up about this?
I just want to say, I mean, I know there's rules and stuff. I was just offering that as an option if that's something that would help Susan out. So I was just trying to keep it open as like if she says, well, that's not really enough time, that this could be a fallback. So I'm not necessarily proposing it. Just anyway, I guess I am. There we go.
And I will if you don't, because I think it's a great idea, especially because I was picturing her John's on being on the computer, but
Yeah,
if it's difficult there. So if there's no objection, we'll go with 4:30 for next month. Okay. And then another issue, Hannah, regarding committee membership. Because I didn't know if we'd had any contact with Tara or with Jacob or.
No, I have not heard from either of them. And have not heard back from the mayor's office either.
Okay.
I think we have open seats still, though, I believe, and I do have interest from a couple community members.
Well, we have 11 total seats and we have 9 current members.
Yeah.
So I think we're assuming Tara has resigned. I thought I remember her saying she had a conflict and she couldn't do it. And my understanding is Jacob, if he were to want to, he would need to have reapplied.
Okay.
One thought I had about Jacob, it was so good to have a youth member, and it just thought it'd be great to send him something since we lost contact, but to send him something just recognizing this in his young career, his participation, which I think a lot of us appreciated him offering the perspective he had, and he had connectivity struggles too. We worked through them. Just wanted to offer that thought. It might be nice for him to have something for his resume or his. Anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. Thought of that earlier.
Certificate of appreciation.
Yeah. Jonah.
Yeah, just back to the future agenda topics. I don't know if it would be for this meeting or maybe as something else would be helpful for me and maybe Tracy. Would be sort of a zoomed out conversation about this committee's work and thinking. I mean, the master plan has a lot of topics, and I'd just be curious to know more about where we're at with the different aspects of the plan and how we're prioritizing where we what we talk about, what we look at. So I don't know if it's an agenda item or a separate conversation, but that would be helpful.
Sounds like a good 5-minute item. No, I'm just kidding. Tracy, you were gonna add to that?
Yep, I agree with Jonah. I feel like there's just so much I don't know, and it's hard to participate without sounding really ignorant. And one thing that I would love to do is take a walk down Main Street with one of you who knows what's going on. That would be great if I could get that to happen. I feel like I could learn a lot.
Carol, and then MJ.
Reminded me both. We've been on Zoom, but you both get a master plan, a physical hard copy. It is on the website, but we can arrange if you're ever in City Hall, or I can drop it off or whatever. Just let me know. And that'll keep you busy for a little while.
And I would add one thing that was very helpful to me, and I can try and find my copy of it on my computer, but when I joined, I think it was Nancy sent me the breakdown of what has been accomplished on the master plan. And I know I saved it somewhere and I will look for it, but Nancy, I don't know if you still have that spreadsheet. I found that very helpful, but I will try and find it because I know that it's on my home computer.
And MJ, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to, if you want to give me a call, I'm happy to take a walk down Main Street with you or to share with you stuff, So feel free to give me a call. I'm usually in Greenfield every day from early until usually late afternoon.
Great, thank you.
And back to the committee membership issue, Hannah, you said you had a couple people interested. If other people could help me, my recollection is we have one open seat available, which Tara had filled, and the other seat is specifically for a youth or student membership. Carol, you're nodding. So, sorry, I got to turn the timer off here. So just wanted to make that point that there's one generally open seat and one is specific as far as qualifications. Great. If there's nothing else on those, we have a few minutes for just general announcements, if anyone has any. Yes, Phil, then MJ.
I'll just share that the proposal to grow marijuana on Country Club Road has turned out to be very controversial. The neighbors are upset, and it has to work its way through the planning board and the ZPA. But the question of whether the abutters can halt an agricultural project that would bring revenue to the city is going to come up. And as head of the Economic Development Committee, I'm afraid it's going to land on my plate. And I don't have a good answer. I'd love to know what the town, what the mood of the town is, what the town wants. Anyway, I'm not sure that's sustainable Greenfield, but it's on my mind.
And this is for more general announcements too, and it might overlap, but thank you. MJ.
I wanted to share with you, we have the downtown Greenfield revitalization plan that we're going to get going on. We were supposed to try to schedule the first meeting yesterday, but the people who are on the committee are very busy people, so we actually are rescheduling it. But I'll keep you briefed on what's going on with that. Let's see, other stuff is we were going to be we're preparing a request for proposal to put out on the First National Bank later in the spring. And we've had some good progress in terms of advancing the evaluation of the industrial land up at the end of Butternut Street. And like I said, we've been quite successful with getting some funding for some things, but we're under embargo, but we'll be announcing those as soon as we can.
Thank you. Well, I think we've reached our time. Great to see everybody. Thanks for all the hard work, and have a good evening.